Hey everybody, Eric Wright here from the Disco Posse podcast. I want to thank you all for listening and now watching. This is really cool because we're adding a new format to the YouTube channel and want to do more video elements. You've seen a couple of the unboxing videos and some of the studio tour. This is going to be a chance to bring more real interactive video content. So today you're going to see the first video episode if you're watching this. This is Chris Psaltis. This is episode 151. Chris is the co-founder of Mist.io. Really, really cool. And I'll get into why that's an important thing in the stuff we talk about. But before we get started, I got to give a huge shout out to our sponsors who've made this all possible. And it begins, of course, with our good friends at Veeam Software. So if you want to get everything you need for your data protection needs, that's everything. You want to back this up, back that up, physical servers, cloud servers, containers, and cloud native. That's right. You said, I don't need to back that stuff up. It's cloud native. Well, guess what? You actually do need to back it up. So you can check out the stuff they've done with the recent purchase of a great company called Kasten. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can check out. So everything you need for your data protection needs, including Office 365, Teams, you name it, check it out. Go to VEE.am/Disco Posse, and you can check out everything they've got. You can even buy it right there. I'm a huge fan of the company, the team, and the platform. So I've been a long-time user, and that's why I love that they support me through the blog and through the podcast. And also, the second thing that I want to share with you is I've done a lot of work out in the field. And one of the things I've noticed is, especially with technical sellers and product marketers, they often really have trouble connecting with people. And I decided to try and close that gap by using techniques that I've learned over years and years of working in very people-forward industries and then working through technology. So what I built was a very simple 4-step guide to allow you to do better software demos that will ultimately lead to closing deals. And what better title? We literally called it the 4-step guide to delivering extraordinary software demos that win deals. It's really that simple. It's a great ebook. You can download it literally right now. And from there, you also get access to the audiobook read by yours truly. And on top of that, you're going to get access to regular AMAs and an online course that's a part of the whole package. So if you want to check that out, fastest way to get there is actually put up a special URL for it called Velocity Closing. It's actually going to be moving under the Rapid Matter brand, but that's a different story. We'll deal with that later. So check it out. Go to velocityclosing.com. You can buy it right now for $27 for everything. Really, really cool. So I'm very proud of the platform and the stuff that's been done and had huge, great feedback. So thank you to all the folks that have already downloaded and read it and listened. And I'm really getting warm feedback, and I'm thankful. And also constructive feedback, which has made its way back into the book. Very, very cool. So if you've already bought a copy of the book, I can actually get you an update with a couple of minor tweaks. Super cool. So big thanks to the folks in making this a real interactive community. All right, back to the fun. This is going to be an episode with Chris Psaltis. Chris, like I said, is the co-founder of Mist.io. We talk about the idea of the myths of multi-cloud management. Right, multi-cloud, most people don't even know what that really means. And in fact, it definitely doesn't mean what you think it means when it comes to where we thought multi-cloud was going and where it is today. So Chris brings a ton of really, really great insight into the multi-cloud myths, the challenges, why people are really doing this, and also tons of great lessons on why and how he built Mist.io with his team, what they're doing, and how to run a business that's founded and really predominantly leaning into open source software. This is a rare treat where you can get a lot of great business lessons. And Chris is just a fantastic human. I'm a real fan of Chris. I've been lucky enough to work with him on a few other projects over the course of time. We've been together, in and out since OpenStack, doing neat stuff. So this is a real treat for me to be able to share this with you, because it was just a chance to sit down with somebody who I'm super proud to be able to call a friend and a colleague in the industry. So with that, let's get started and let's see Chris Psaltis, episode 151, Disco Posse Podcast. And for all the information and the other links, go to discopossepodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Chris Psaltis. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mist.io, and you're watching the Disco Posse podcast.
Very cool. Now, the funny thing is that as I'm starting 2021 here, I'm doing more like actual video. So it's kind of neat to hear, watching instead of just listening, because I've got the YouTube channel up, and we're seeing more and more people are actually engaging over there, which is kind of nice.
How does that go, by the way?
It's interesting that I don't know, it's sort of early days to tell, but it was funny as I'm posting the older episodes up, they're getting like a lot of listens as they're
Mm,
going up. So I'm like, people seem to be catching it in their feed and watching them. So
mhm.
we'll see how it goes. But I've got like Spotify, and I've got Stitcher, I've got all sorts of different areas. So it's
You've
podcast statistics are brutal to keep track of. That's one thing I've learned for sure.
you've been doing it for a while, right? Yeah, I remember shows like back in 2017 or something.
Yeah, it's been a while. And so this is the
Oh,
funny thing. I'm excited today because like you and I have been kind of like almost bumping into each other in so many different ways
yeah.
through the industry. And so for folks that don't know you, Chris, let's have you sort of introduce yourself. We'll talk about Mist.io. We'll talk about a lot of things, and one of the big subjects I want to get into is sort of the myths of multi-cloud, and kind of like what the pundits thought it was going to be and what it actually is in practice. And I know you got a lot of like real world field experience about that stuff. So let's start with you. Tell us about where we can find you online and all that good stuff.
So okay, yes. So as I said, my name is Chris Psaltis. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mist.io. I'm an engineer, although I've turned business executive along the way, for good or for worse. And at Mist.io, we're building an open source multi-cloud management platform. And that's where the whole experience around multi-cloud comes from the cases of users and customers over several years. So you can find me online on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm not like a regular social media person, but reach out to me there or over email, and I will get back to you for sure.
Now the neat thing about how like I've got so much history, in the industry alongside you. It's hilarious when we go back and you start to trace back like when we probably first actually met and didn't even know it, because we had
Yeah,
a lot of stuff in open source. We've, just,
OpenStack. You
yeah,
remember those days?
I know, I still have the scars to prove it. It's because you did a lot of early stuff with you were doing stuff with Rackspace. I remember that was probably the first time I think I bumped into you,
Yeah,
is that you were actually, I think you're actually interviewed by Robert Scoble, and I remembered
yeah,
seeing that, and I was like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that was when Rackspace was like all about the open cloud, and it's funny that they've evolved so much and gone private and then public and then private. Like, it's everybody's going through these really wild shifts in the public cloud and hosted managed public cloud ecosystem. So it's
It's a very interesting space, and because it's changing all the time. So it's a very dynamic situation. That's the beauty of it. But yes, I think like the first time we bumped into each other was back then. Like, oh, I don't even want to say what was the year then.
yeah, it's the neat thing about where like open ecosystems and open tech is right now. I truly believe that it's thriving on the back of OpenStack. I think that OpenStack created a momentum of first belief in the power of open technologies and open source platforms that can work at scale. And we're still seeing true, like OpenStack still succeeding very well in areas of the world, and in areas like telecommunications. So stuff that's where we don't see it as a consumer and B2B stuff, but it's still out there thriving in a very interesting and unique set of use cases. But what it did was it taught us that it's not easy to run your own DIY upstream open source platform. And so then we went through the ecosystem challenges where everybody started creating distributions. And then there was this kind of war of the minds, like, well, no, it should be purely like it should deploy from code, from source every time. So you got that crowd. And then you've got the no, I want to buy my stuff from VMware and EMC and Dell and Cisco. So I want it to come on a CD. Like they want to get a release every quarter with an update. And we believed still a lot in that this would be the main platform, not that it would be part of a portfolio of platforms. And it didn't succeed because of all of those things. Like commercially, I'll say it didn't succeed as well as some would have hoped. But
Yeah.
Kubernetes is now, because we earned our stripes kind of trying open source in OpenStack, and we realized where it worked, where it didn't, and we learned a lot about ourselves as organizations. So anyways, that was a lot, but like, what's your experience on it? Because you're both in, open clouds, obviously the commercial, proprietary, public clouds. You're covering the gamut in how you're touching the world and the customers you work with.
Yeah, well, we have seen and we have touched and we have worked with pretty much everything since 2009. Like back in the day, we were running a consulting agency. We had customers around the world, and we were doing open source development for them, maintaining these packages. As well as handling the whole deployment, maintenance thing, training, and all that. So over time, we have worked with pretty much everything, and practically the reason we've built Mist.io was to help ourselves serve those customers. Like back then, they were all over the place, like AWS, Rackspace, on-prem, Colo, VMware. Most of them are still there. But we were a small team, and we wanted to do things like, make our lives simpler and know what we have, where do we have it, without having to go through all sorts of interfaces, tools, etc. And we also wanted to help our customers control their spending and make it easier for them to provision stuff without calling us and saying, oh, Chris, I need a VM ABCD, like that. So that's how we started working on Mist.io to scratch our own itch. And, we had the feeling that this would be a weekend or two project, but yeah, it turned out much bigger than that.
It's funny how that happens.
But along the way, we have worked with pretty much every infrastructure technology out there. We're big open source fans, so we have committed code as well. All the way, from the OpenStack community days to Kubernetes and all. Yeah, so it's certainly interesting, and I'm not sure if, like you mentioned, OpenStack and how it has evolved to become Kubernetes, let's say in some way. I don't know if Kubernetes is the end state, though. It's
right.
If it's the end game, and that's the beautiful thing about this space. You never get bored. There's also always something new coming out, and in fact, I think like the time between these new generations of things is getting shorter and shorter. Like we went from mainframes to blades to virtualized to containers. And all that is getting a little bit shorter every time. Every iteration is getting shorter. Now I'm waiting to see what's coming up next.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about each of those phases was they solved a specific problem, and like the mainframe to distributed was definitely a shift in the languages that were prevalent at the time or growing at the time, and you couldn't host them on the mainframe, and people were tired of batch. They needed more real time. So that was And I remembered working in an organization, and there's like the huge, like the mainframe was the business. It was literally like, it's a massive,
Yeah.
well, people can read my LinkedIn. So I worked at Sun Life. It's Sun Life Financials where I worked for years. And I started in the distributed side. I started on desktop and then moved to distributed servers. And I literally got told, they're like, oh, this distributed stuff is kind of a fad. I see that it's kind of scaling up, but you already have like 50 servers. I don't understand why it's getting so out of control. And that's how it was viewed, is like, it's getting out of control. And you're
Yeah.
like, I think this is actually going to be a thing. It's going to stick. And next thing you know, we had like 1,500 servers, and I had more domain controllers than I had, back then in total server count. And then from there, we moved. So client server didn't work for web, and all of a sudden we had web, and then web became web 2.0, and then became like, so I love this, like you said, this iterative thing, but it comes much faster. And so can trends as well. Like, I think the trends come and go quickly. But like, I remember there was a time, when was it? Not even that long ago. And the whole big thing was when Google released Go and people started using it. It was like, this is very cool. It's it's an amazing language. And, as I'm not a programmer, so I'm like, but I hear from programmers, they love it. It's strongly typed, loosely, whatever. It's all this crazy stuff, but it's super fast. You can do all these neat things. And people started to put it like on their webpage of like, our product was built with Go, like it was a
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
like shiny bumpers. And then they realized, like, no, you can't just refactor everything in Go and make it better. Like, it's going to be horrifying if you spend all your time refactoring into a different language.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've seen a lot of those shifts in like why people are moving, and how they're leveraging it. So we look
Eh,
today at multi-cloud, and when did multi anything become like acceptable? Because I feel like it's people are figured it out. They're like, okay, we get it. We can't get rid of one thing and take on the other.
yeah, I think it was always there. It was always there because, in the sense of not exactly cloud, but different types of infrastructure hosting different applications. Um, when things moved on from mainframes to virtualized servers, not all applications were migrated from the mainframes to the virtual servers. And it didn't make a lot of sense. Either it was totally impossible or crazy expensive, or, if it's not broken, why fix it?
Right.
So I think that that situation was around since the beginning. It's certainly not something new. However, again, thinking from my personal experience back in 2012, 2013, the comments I heard when I was talking about multi-cloud was like, what? Well, who is ever going to do this? Why
That's
get
right.
into so much trouble? AWS will beat everyone. Everybody will run on AWS, and that's it. Period. And maybe they will have something on-prem, but at some point they will migrate it to the public cloud. So yeah, this certainly didn't happen, and I think it's only now that people start realizing that all these different generations of things are running at the same time. There will never be a state where a reasonably large organization, I'm not talking like a startup here or anything like that, but a reasonably big organization with some history behind it will be on a single platform, and that's it, period. It will never be this case. So although I still don't think that the multi-cloud term is the perfect one to describe something like that. This heterogeneity, let's say, is here. It's been here forever, and it will stay with us, I don't know if forever is a very strong word, but it will stay with us for a long time. As those new generations of infrastructure technologies get introduced, old ones don't die, new are just added.
Yeah.
And then you have this continuum of different types of technologies that need to somehow work together or even coexist in a reasonable way. So, in that sense, I think that people only recently started realizing that they need to do something about it, and they need to embrace this situation rather than just be denying it.
Yeah, there's the seven stages of grief. It's like the seven stages of multi-cloud. There's, distrust, punditry, the belief that it doesn't actually exist or that it does the thing that you didn't expect it to do. Grief, like there's all these different layers, and then finally acceptance.
Yeah. I think we're there now. Yeah, we're in the acceptance stage.
The funny thing about and I put punditry in the middle of that because I think the loudest voices are the ones that we shouldn't listen to, because for so long you saw these people that really their whole purpose is to have an opinion and have it be strong and have it be bold. And we got told about, this multi-cloud vision of of an application that will run somewhere and it'll be brokered between the clouds and it'll go to wherever's
Yeah,
cheapest at the moment. And that just, because of data gravity, because of all these other things, because of other supporting services like identity and access management and all these other things, it just didn't make sense unless you were LinkedIn or Netflix or whatever. And even there, they're not really doing it across clouds, they're doing it across
exactly.
regions, if anything, right?
Certainly, this marketing and sales talk wasn't really helpful, and it
Yeah.
kind of created this perception of multi-cloud as being something not very, let's say, not very advisable. Because I'm sure, I think you've written about that as well, like those OpenStack days when cloud bursting was a thing. Like I
Yeah.
would be running OpenStack on-prem and then I would burst to AWS or wherever. Yeah, so like there was a lot of miscommunication around actual use cases and when it does make sense to do multi-cloud, how to do multi-cloud. So probably people didn't understand it very well back then, or they were too eager to push their own version of whatever product they were selling, and this had a negative effect in the space altogether. And for some time, I believe that was a key thing that dragged the whole adoption of and the acceptance of multi-cloud. Yeah, but I think we're over that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things are much better, certainly.
I even remember the days of like Randy Bias sort of strongly driving the idea of the Nova EC2
API.
API, and it like just signed the sort of this vitriol that he received, feel like, no, it's like this is a proprietary commercial thing, we can't allow it to be.
Yeah,
And I understand kind of why that really strong internal open only opinion was there, but unfortunately I think it that may have actually extended the viability of OpenStack if they had used it as a
yeah,
manager of. And the good news is that got that out of the way, and then Mist IO came along and solved the problem. But like it's so funny that we've come close to the edge of crossing the chasm between different vendors and different platforms a few times, and then because the people that are trying to do it are way too involved in one of the two places, it's like any open standard. Everyone says, yeah, we should all accept a standard. Let's start with mine. And
yeah,
this is why the unopinionated multi-cloud, and this is why I really dig what your team is doing, is this, that you can present an unopinionated way to consume, control, these ecosystems, and then and just accept that, right? What do you want to do well? Then let's do that, and then underneath it, we'll leverage stuff. And by the way, it's going to cost you a bundle if you do it on your own as well. So we can kind of reel that in too, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, that's the cool thing and the hard thing at the same time.
It's right.
And since you brought up this discussion with the EC2 API and OpenStack, I never really understood why they didn't do it. I was in front of such discussions with Randy, and it made perfect sense. I still cannot explain why they didn't adopt this. It was the vendors pushing back. I don't know. I have no idea. It made perfect sense. And I think that this is probably the right way to go today as well. Like, have some sort of baseline API that works across any underlying infrastructure platform. And that's what we are trying to do, like create this multi-cloud API without making any assumptions about the underlying layers. It's not the EC2 API though. It's yet another one, but in any case, it's like one of the core things that we're trying to solve. And yeah, it's interesting, but it's hard, unfortunately.
Well, it's super important, and I kind of call it the manager of managers, I think, is one of the phrases that we use, in that idea that you can create a consumable layer that underneath it will be comprised of other opinionated layers, and creating that right level of abstraction is where that's where the huge value is. And it's a big weight off of an internal engineering team when they don't have to worry about that. This is why, another great team that I had on from a company called Hasura, and they've got really neat stuff that they're doing around GraphQL, and effectively using GraphQL as a front end behind all this other data, because no one wants to move their data from where it is to a database that has a GraphQL API already present. So they're like, fine, we'll abstract it, give you the GraphQL, capabilities on whatever your legacy data platform is. And they're slowly adding more stuff. And that's really cool to engineer it there. I think that's the right place to attack the problem.
There are several ways to do it. I mean, our approach is just one of the potential approaches. It depends on your use case a lot. Like this example you gave is a good example of a multi-cloud approach without actually going exactly multi-cloud. Like, you introduce a new layer on top, that a new application that works in a multi-cloud environment. So using multi-cloud applications is certainly one way to do it. The other option would be to standardize, like on some sort of infrastructure API, like the example we discussed back from the OpenStack days, like standardize on the EC2 API, but then you need other components that work with the EC2 API. OpenStack didn't do it. Maybe if they did, it would be much better. But nowadays we have Kubernetes, and Kubernetes serves as this layer, let's say, of abstraction. It's not exactly the VM layer, it's not exactly an application layer, it's somewhere in between. So we see people standardizing against Kubernetes, and once you do that, like, at least in theory, you can run it on-prem, off-prem, get it as a managed service. So you can simplify your life with that. Then is also like something like the Mist.io approach, let's say, where we are communicating directly with the infrastructure layer. But you also have all those tools like Ansible, Terraform, things like that, where you try to abstract the workflow rather than the infrastructure underneath it. So there are like many different ways you can achieve similar results. They're not exactly complementary, they're not exactly competing. There is a lot of overlap, and it kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve in the end of the day. What's your setup like? What's your team experience? and what you're trying to do. So I think that at least today the whole space is much more interesting because of all these things that are available out there, where you can pick the pieces that make more sense for your use case.
In Even if you've nailed it down, you said, all right, the entire organization is aligning on AWS or Azure or whatever it's going to be, or OpenStack, Rackspace, whatever you like, pick the cloud, we're going to go on the Atos managed cloud, whatever it's going to be. Like you'd say, like, this is it, line in the sand, everything's going here, and they succeed. And it would be a magical world. It would be like waking up from a dream. And then they announce the acquisition of another company that's running entirely on a Google Cloud.
Yeah.
There's no way
Yeah.
like that. Even if you win, you're not done winning. You're bound to bump in. And I think that's the biggest multi-cloud use case I've seen in production deployments today is multi by acquisition cloud, where they just didn't have a choice. Like they acquired a bunch of workloads, they acquired a sub company,
Yeah.
and that's it. Like so they're not going to rewrite it and refactor it.
This is a very common use case. Legacy stuff we discussed already. This is another very common use case. You cannot erase history, and the example you said, like from today we're just on Azure and nothing else. I haven't seen it. Never. Like even if people tried over times in several occasions, they all failed. The other common situation is that I have a team that's more familiar with Google Cloud versus Azure. So, I may have a lot of things running on Azure, but then this team is running on Google, and the team next to it is running on AWS for whatever reason. So it's mostly about the people. Because in the end of the day, as a business, you want your people to be able to move faster. And if adopting something new helps them move faster, it will probably happen even without you knowing it.
Right.
So that's another common reason we see. And then something that's getting pitched a lot lately, although I don't think that we're quite there yet, is getting the best from its cloud. I'm getting BigQuery from Google. I love it. It's very fast, very nice. I'm getting AI ML stuff from Google. I'm getting data lake stuff from AWS. So I mix and match depending on the needs of the workload. I think people are mostly talking about it, but they don't actually do it.
Right.
I do believe, though, that over time this will change, and we will have cases where, as clouds differentiate between them more and more and more, and try to become dominant players in a specific field, it will probably make more sense to start mixing and matching based on feature set and functionality.
Yeah, it's like multi-cloud is like good dieting. Everybody says they're doing it, but nobody's actually doing it. Like we definitely slip, and I think that's fair. I think like you said at the start, like it's acceptance. We have to understand that this is just, it doesn't make sense to, it's not the hill you want to die on, is that whether you can narrow down to a single cloud or you want to do this pie in the sky use case of spanning clouds, and even just the whole data structure problem is probably one of the biggest things that people really really struggle with. And in the end, it just doesn't make sense. Like why? That's why data lakes are fantastic, that you can take us like a data warehouse. Remember, that was back in the old day. I'm old,
Yeah.
so I remember data warehouse. We had like ETL teams that like that's their whole thing. In fact, if I had a recent conversation with a fellow named Rick Hall, and their company is doing this kind of like data front end layer of like solving that problem of like bring your data to one spot, leave it in data lakes all over the place, and then we'll just pick up buckets as you need it. So I think just this understanding that in production we know we've got legacy, and it's as I always say, you call it legacy, I call it production. Like these are systems that are going to live a long time.
Yeah, like Mitsuo Hashimoto has a nice line I borrow from time to time. He says that like you don't choose multi-cloud, multi-cloud chooses you, and I think that's very accurate. It sounds funny, but this is how it happens in real life, and the reality is messy. So you better just accept the fact and move forward, rather than try to deny it.
Yeah, it's like even I remembered the architectural perfection that we chased, like enterprise architects. Like we have to think that way. It's like the saying goes, plans are useless, but planning is essential.
Yeah.
And we'd have these big UML diagrams on the office wall, and it'd be called a day in the life of whatever application. And you'd see all the flows of data comes from here, goes here, runs in batch. Then here's the real time. And we'd like show all these shims and plugins and arrows. It was neat. And then like 72 hours later, somebody would fire in some Ruby on Rails, API front end on some other thing. And next thing you know, and that will never get documented. And that UML diagram just
Starts
grows
from scratch.
old, and you start all over. But now here's the other thing: how did you get to very well, glue together the importance of the business value to the technical value? Because you're a really good engineer, you're a good builder, but you think business. So you kind of joked at the start that you've had to become a business person, but it's in you. Like I can tell, and just even the way we've always had our discussions, it's like you always look further. Like the excitement of the tech never outweighs the value to the business. How did that happen?
I don't know, to be honest. Like, I'm not a business executive by education or anything like that. I'm an engineer, and rather a geeky one. Like I studied computer vision, machine learning, things like that. So rather hardcore stuff, like let's say. And it kind of happened along the way. As I was discussing with people who were having problems, and I wanted to help them. I didn't try to sell them stuff that would make no sense. So that's how I think kind of evolved. Like, we were very customer user centric. We were always part of communities in the open source world, so we have this level of empathy, let's say, and the real drive to help people solve their problems, because these are problems that we are facing ourselves, and so we have an even greater motivation to solve the problems for ourselves, and solve those problems for other people out there, and to help them make their life easier, because life shouldn't be about managing multi-cloud infrastructure. It should be about something else.
Yeah, it's like the old thing of like multi-cloud management isn't your actual problem. The problem is that you've got development teams that are coming from different backgrounds, that have legacy applications that are already in place, and you need to bring those together. That's the real multi-cloud problem. But yeah, if you think the problem is that I want to use AWS and Azure for funsies, like that's not your problem.
Yeah. But we are guilty there as well. It's hard to resist signing new things, speaking as engineers. And yeah, so we have done that. We had our fair share of trouble, because the first cool new thing we saw, we jumped right into it, and that's how we adopted containers. Actually,
well, I think it's necessary, and that's what makes you. This is why I love, when we get to engage, because it's like you do it in the sense that you want to see where it breaks, not like
exactly.
There's the cool factor of it, and like it's my favorite thing. I love testing the edges, and then you find it like, whoo, wow, that didn't work out like I had hoped. Make sure we don't do that in production, but that's how you find out, right?
Maybe sometime you will find out in production as well. It didn't happen to us.
Yeah, we don't always. As Charity Major says, you all test in production. Whether you believe it or not, you all test in production.
Yeah.
So your background is wild. Like, So let's what got you into going very deep on, you talked about vision and machine learning and AI, like what drew you to that as an area of study?
Um, I it like it's a tough question, to be honest. Like I think that I'm not 100% sure though. I think that I was mostly motivated by the whole science fiction fantasy of making artificial intelligence and replacing all those things that you currently do manually with with software. So, like a part of the AI problem is computer vision. That was closer to what I was doing during my university days. So I went from student. I started my PhD in machine learning, computer vision. I got engaged in research projects on those subjects, and at some point, like a friend of mine called me and said, we're thinking to start a company, maybe pick up a couple of research projects from here and there. Are you interested? I know you're working with this stuff. Oh yeah, like sign me up. And then we started the company, and then nothing happened. We lost all our applications
Oh no.
for the grants we had in mind. We got rejected everywhere, and like a couple of weeks, I think ago, after the last rejection, some people in the team were in a conference, in a Python open source conference, and they found a customer who was like totally unrelated with what we had to do. We had in mind to do, at least. And yeah, that's how it started. And one thing led to the other. It's hard to explain. It's a set of coincidences, let's say.
Yeah, well, that's in effect, what does sort of the best thing is, like, you take an actual, like, active problem and you try and solve it. And especially consulting led businesses, in doing the consulting and doing that practical on the ground work, you then realize, oh, I need a tool or a method to do this thing because I'm doing it all the time. And then you realize, hey, if I'm having this problem over and over again, maybe somebody else is. So next thing you know, your consulting practice becomes a product led business.
Yeah.
And it's neat to see the transition as you go through that. Like, how fast was this move from, hey, we're at a conference and I think I've got a customer for something, to, like, okay, we've officially pivoted?
I think it was five, 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's not like the books go, like, when you read Hatching Twitter, like, you read one chapter to the next as if it was like overnight over a weekend. It was actually like
no.
years in between these stages, right?
It was much longer, and it certainly felt much longer. But then, during the first beta release, let's say, of Mist.io, we applied to an accelerator in California, Mozilla's accelerator back in the day. We got accepted. We had this open source mindset. We wanted to do something that's more open source related. So me and my co-founder, we landed in San Francisco in early 2013, I think. And then probably the next day we were like, okay, forget about the consulting business. Now we're doing Mist.io and nothing else.
Yeah, this is it. This is the cut.
This is
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like, yeah, it was like I've never been in California and Silicon Valley before that occasion. So it was like a revelation. It was like the mecca of the technology people.
Yeah.
It was a weird feeling.
It's funny that one of the fellows that I've come up in the industry with a lot, named Angelo Luciani, if you know Angelo, he's was big on. So we came out of the VMware community primarily. We did a lot of stuff because we ran it at my own environment, and so we ran the VMUG, the user group, and we were involved in that. And I remember going to VMworld like the first time, and we were in a cab together because we both flew in from Toronto, and we landed, and we're going down the 101, heading from the airport to San Francisco, and it was just that we're like, I'm canceling my return flight. This is it. I'm home. Like every sign is for a technology company. Like I came from I worked at an insurance company and then a financial services company where IT was seen as like a pain in the butt. Like
Yeah.
you were never going to make more than the back office people for the company because that was not the heart of their business. Like
Yeah.
IT was not seen as so. Canadian engineering teams don't tend to make a lot of money. And so you can see why we're easily tempted towards the US sort of salary range. But it was funny, like you said, there's that moment where you're like, it's different here. And, but to talk on that, you're not located in California.
No, 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 no.
And
No.
you've been successful in keeping your company and growing the company. So what's it like living outside of
So,
the valley, right? I'm curious.
uh, look, first of all, we are a US company, and some of our investors are coming from the States as well.
Yeah.
So, but that was the plan since day one. I mean, the plan was that, our market is in North America mostly.
Right.
Uh, the audience is there. The need for something like that is mostly there, where cloud adoption was much faster and still is much faster than in Europe. But you also get a lot of other side benefits, like it's a more homogeneous market. One language, mostly one cultural background.
Right.
Whereas in Europe, you have to deal with all those different types of people, language barriers, things like that. So we had our minds in following what I would say like the Israeli model. Develop and do R&D in Greece, where we are coming from and we're based, but sell and market in North America.
Right.
And this has some side benefits as well. Of course, the cost of living here is much lower than California. Everywhere is, I think, everywhere is much
Yeah,
lower than California.
exactly. It's hard to rival the costs of California, but it's funny we're seeing a lot of folks, especially now, that because of the sort of suddenly remote lifestyles that we've all had to adopt,
Yeah.
you're seeing people that are definitely, it's no longer a physical boundary, but we're still, there is value in being local, at least in regions for a lot of things.
Yeah, that was certainly something that posed challenges in the early days. Not being local, not having uh, gone through the usual US colleges or whatever.
Yeah.
Not having common references, not having a network, but you can build that over time. Yeah, as long as you're persistent and you have a good reason for for being so, then you can make it. It's an uphill battle to get started with, but over time it gets better. And now with everybody being remote one way or another, things are much simpler too. Now, the playing field is more level than than ever before.
That is true. Yeah, and this is an interesting one, and I'm always torn in how much I look to the positive of what we've come out of, right? Like but we have to, like, I have to look for, despite the situation, not because of, it's sort of like we've been able to succeed in certain ways. And one thing is that being able to support remote workforces, being able to level the playing field. Like when I used to go to a conference, especially, like if you want to go and you've got a fantastic team, a fantastic product, you've got this beautiful opportunity. Well, you're at KubeCon, and it's now 5-6 years in or whatever with KubeCon. Well, all of a sudden, all the booths are being bought by VMware, Cisco,
Yeah, yeah,
Dell,
yeah.
right? And so unless
You
you've got
cannot
a
really compete there.
right, but meanwhile you're part of the founding like teams, like all of these amazing people that literally sort of built the original community, they get shoved out the sides, which is why I can understand why they get a little irked about commercial vendors coming into an open space, because all of a sudden you're now competing for marketing dollars,
Yeah.
and it's tough because you can get upended from the very thing that you created. So it's a
And
weird.
that was the deal with OpenStack as well. I mean, at some point, OpenStack Summit became like a huge industry fair
Yeah,
that was much bigger than anything that I have ever seen before. Like it exploded, like with vendors and people. Wow, it was crazy. It was exciting. It was a nice place to be, but also it was really, really hard to make your voice heard without spending six figures on
yeah,
marketing. So now I think the pandemic is helping filter bullshit out.
yep.
Uh, and
Exactly.
somebody who has something to say and what he's saying has value. It's it's not easier, but at least I think he has more chances than before.
Yeah, it's the I really do welcome the opportunity for sort of democratizing access to customers. It makes it harder for everybody, and I think that's kind of cool. So I mean, through my work at my company, we were very successful in digital engagement already. We were
Mhm.
doing webinars, and we were getting a couple of thousand registrations, and we get a few hundred attendees. We were getting more than we would have gotten if we'd have paid all of this money to go to a VMworld or a reInvent. Now it's different because there's other things that are there as part of that experience, but it meant that I could build the content through audience building and other work that we've done in marketing. We could effectively bring 500-600 people to a room at once
Yeah,
and meaningfully engage them, because I
exactly.
learned how
Yeah,
to do it. We built a way to do it. But now
it's it's
what you get
it's
is
more meaningful and you have more impact, and
right.
you have more money to do it again and again and again, more
Yeah.
than you would probably do it in another case. So, yeah,
The
that's
problem that we're going to bump into now is the attention economy that we're facing, right? Like, so the downside to before, so I would go to VMworld and reInvent and Microsoft Ignite and KubeCon and OpenStack Summit or Open Infrastructure Summit as it is now, right? I would go to all these things, and there'd be 250 vendors at each one. So you all had a level playing field there in a way, because you were all there at the same time and you were just fighting for, the best t-shirts to get people to
yeah,
come to
yeah.
your booth. Well, now
Wasn't that a
there's
little bit silly though?
it
I
is.
mean,
Oh,
now in
it totally
retrospect.
is. Yeah, yeah. But the problem that happened with 2020 was that all of those 250 sponsoring vendors suddenly built their own virtual conference,
Yeah.
and they were now fighting for time. And so that shook out pretty well. And I think a lot of companies are going to be like, I'm not going to do a 3-day conference again. But yeah, you're right. The thing we used to do, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I'm going to go there and like sit on down for 15 minutes and you can win a free iPad and you get this
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it's such a weird thing that we have to do. But it works. Like, that's the sad thing, is it gets people to sit down, you get their name, you phone them 22 times, and eventually they take the demo, and then you like, oh, it's a weird machine. I'm kind of saddened that has to happen, when it probably shouldn't have to be that way.
Yeah, maybe I do believe though that comparing the two approaches, like the webinars you mentioned in your company with the huge events, live events, I believe that you're getting better quality. You're getting less volume,
Right.
but you're getting better quality. So I don't know. I don't know. It's really hard to do the math, but I have a feeling that probably it will stick around this new approach that was kind of mandatory in 2020. I think that going into 2021, it's not fading totally away. At least
Right.
we'll see.
I actually do like the idea that it could create an opportunity for a two streamed events. Like, so yeah, sure, we'll run in-person events, but we'll also provide it virtually at the same time, whether it's all the content or it's delayed or whatever, like however they want to do it. I think it does open up to parts of the world, because there are parts of the world who don't have access to this content
Yeah,
because of
exactly. Yeah.
cost and like the visas and all this craziness that you got to do to come to North America. And it's funny that you know you really nicely described how like being in North America is a great thing because it's one language and it's like it's easier, common time zones, like all the stuff. And it's funny being
Not
part.
not common time zones.
Well,
Time
that's
zones
true.
are
That's
much better in Europe.
yeah, but it's like it's a beautiful positive way to describe the sort of unification of brand and approach versus me. I love working with European organizations and nations and languages. So I have the struggle of, I call it the arrogance of North America, that we believe everything should be done in either Pacific or Eastern, all in English. We talk too fast. We like everything is like, so I try to
It's not
think
that bad.
broader.
It's not that bad. Try to follow somebody speaking French, for
Oh
example.
yeah. I
So I think like it's the same problem everywhere. It's just that the segmentation and the fragmentation is different. So yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe like the thing that's further away from you seems better.
that may be it. Maybe it.
This is
Yeah.
also the same effect.
Yeah, there's a beauty in what you don't see every day. I guess that's the thing. And so I love, like, I was at the Paris, like the OpenStack or the Open Source Summit in Paris in January. That was January last year. I was like, it seems like a decade ago,
A decade
because it
ago, yeah.
was it was so different. And I remembered it was, even then we were like, we knew like, got to be careful. I flew with a mask anyways because my wife has a compromised immune system. So I just, out of habit, we always fly around with masks. So it was like kind of normal. Like everybody would look at me strange. So like, what's wrong with that guy? Why is he wearing a mask? Like, oh, it's but so the other thing that's interesting, and you it mentioned in passing, you said like I doing the math. So being a technical founder, how did you find taking on running the business and thinking around all of that stuff that's very far from the product itself? Like, how do you do that?
It's much simpler than finding a bug in C. So it's not rocket science. uh, well, you it's I think it's common sense, and
It's not as common as you'd think. That's the
well,
I
yeah,
that's the
it depends on how you do business, but we face it as an engineering problem, let's say.
yeah.
That's our approach to it. And in this context, it wasn't super hard to adapt. Of course, you need you need to have some special traits, let's say. uh, I don't know if these are learned, or if you are born with them. But once they're there, then it's a matter of just doing it. Like, you know, just do it. Just be patient, do it, repeat, learn. Not in this way, but
Yeah, yeah.
in this
But
order, but
did
something like that.
your background in coming from education and research and like that, because you went so far so deep, you understood the grant program system, like you went down that road, did that kind of train you for, hey, I'm going to do something that's scientific
Yeah,
or
yeah,
technical, and I need to fund it?
yeah, that was like the skills, the practical skills I've learned today are pretty much useless. If I try to do anything from what I was learning back in the day, I will totally fail. And even if I achieve it, nobody will care because nowadays you can just get like 3 terabytes of data sets from Google and analyze them in a couple of seconds. Like
Yeah.
that was unheard of. But in any case, the useful part from all that, what I value the most, at least, is the analytical thinking, and the analytical communication expression, like trying to figure out what is the reason behind something, how you can get to a potential solution to this problem, and then how can you communicate that in a clear and crisp and fact-checked way to somebody else. Because if you know it by yourself and nobody else knows it, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. You need to communicate this, and there are people who are very good at analyzing things. They're not so good in communicating things, so you need to have like at least a bit of both, some equal portions of both. That was the key takeaway from my lifetime ago education.
Yeah. Also feels like forever ago, right? But it says
Yeah.
the interesting thing I like you described, like the rapid access to data to test the stuff out. It's so funny how, like, I remembered how difficult it was to even think about, doing this stuff. And first, because you had, like, if you're doing research, you have to go build the methodology, get the surveys, get the people, do the engagements, weed out the, like, it's a very long process. And now, and then from there, then you were using SAS or whatever to like go through the data and figure out the statistical representation of your output.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh,
Finding
just,
data sets, that was the hardest part.
yeah,
Finding the data sets, at least for the wider AI space. Finding the data set, that was impossible. Like uh, building them, good luck with that. So yeah, that was the hardest part, because compute time was okay. I mean, what can you do? If you have to wait for a week, you will wait for a week. But if you don't have the data to start with, then it's pretty. There are no other options, and the situation evolved so quickly that I didn't even expect it to happen. Like back then, at least, if in 2006, 7, 8, you were telling me that at some point you would be able to do image labeling in a couple of seconds, based on data from like a huge data set for free, or
yeah,
like almost free, that yeah, you're crazy. It's never going to happen. But yet, here we are.
here we are. Yeah. What? So here's an interesting thing too. I remember one of my sort of favorite quotes from Peter Thiel, and he talks about this idea that we were, we were promised, or we sought out the Star Trek lifestyle, but all we got was the Star Trek computer. What, on that front, what's the most positive thing you've seen come as a result of technology that you've been involved in?
Oh, well, that's a tough one. Especially the space is not very society friendly.
Yeah.
But uh, it's it's more about the access people nowadays have to compute power. That's not just the compute power, but also the frameworks, the tools on top of that. It's much easier for anybody to do anything he can think of, for good or for worse. But it's super simple for everybody to start hacking right away with whatever their idea is, whatever they need to do. In a couple of minutes, they can be up and running with an account on AWS, Google, Azure, wherever, and do real cool stuff with it, with $10 per month or something like that.
Yeah.
That was something that, looking back, was missing. Not very long ago, just like 15 years ago. So it's not like half a century or anything like that. But it certainly does seem so. Like the space that we have covered and the evolution over this small period of time is very impressive. And being able to just create an account, click a button, and get 10 servers in 5 seconds, and then start running cat picture analysis on it. That's a fairy tale. It sounds like a fairy tale. And although I'm not sure if people actually appreciate that, it's a game changer in so many ways.
That is true. And it's funny, like you having grown up through the evolution of it, I see the beauty in where we've gotten, and like you said, the access that we open up, not just for us, but for anyone, or most everyone at least. But yeah, then all of a sudden you bump into something like, it took me like 3 minutes to boot up my instance. This is garbage. So they're like, like, no, you don't understand. We used to have to like physically provision servers, get budget, get it shipped to you, get it on the floor, contact 7 teams to get it connected to the data center.
And 1 year later, you can run your program.
That's right. To which you have no data, no, so we can literally go this. I use a product called Algorithmia for some stuff. And it was literally like for another beautiful abstraction that I needed to do, like I wanted to do natural language processing. And so I built a little platform where I was doing like daily journaling. And so I'm like, let me take this and run it through NLP. And I'm like, do I hack this together on AWS and go through that? I'm like, hey, why don't I check this Algorithmia out? And it literally is just like an API. You send it JSON results of your data. It sends you back your response. It gives you your sentiment analysis. Like, this is even better. And same thing, they've got a free tier that I've been using this for a long time. I've never had to pay money. And
I hope they're not listening.
Yeah. I keep waiting. When I saw, and at reInvent this year, we saw more about like that level of access inside Amazon specifically. And Google has that, of course, all the others. The weird thing is, isn't funny? Like, for me, at least, when someone says public cloud, AWS, it's like word association to me, because it's my broadest sort of exposure. But
for a long time they were like the only player out there, so it's very reasonable. I still use AWS terminology when trying to describe things, and some people are looking at me, well, like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm using Azure only. Oh yeah, sorry about that.
That's right.
The default thing is AWS terminology.
Yeah, I remember presenting at Ignite with the engineering team from the compute side for Azure, and it was so funny. The person that was there, he's like, "Hey, can you do me a favor? Make sure you don't say instances." I'm like, "Don't worry, I know. We got to call them VMs, and we talk about subscriptions, not accounts. I got it. It's SKUs instead of families." So like, but it is. I think now we're far enough along that people kind of get it, luckily, but it is, you do want to sort of speak in the local dialect, I guess.
Well, at least on a terminology level, I think they have beaten everybody else.
Well, that was it. Remember when Azure didn't expose availability zones. They called them data centers, and then their regions, they had less regions, and then the terminology inside Azure was different. And
Yeah.
then they finally said, look, everyone is calling them availability zones and regions. Let's just call them that. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, Andy Jassy. You were right. We agree. We'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to fight that.
There's a in Canada, this is a weird thing, that you cannot buy, or now you can, but you couldn't buy liquor or beer in anywhere other than a dedicated government operated store, and it was called Brewers Retail for decades.
I mean, that today I cannot do it.
Yeah.
Or it used to be a case.
Yeah. Well, like now you can, like, but
Okay.
like this is like, I'll say now it's like a decade ago since they've changed, but only in the last couple of years since you could buy it in like grocery stores or whatever. So it was always called Brewers Retail, and it was run, and the other one was LCBO, Liquor Control Board of Ontario, and it was very specific, but they called it Brewers Retail. That's what they called it. Everybody else called it the beer store, because that's what it was. And eventually they gave in and they renamed it the beer store.
Beer store. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like, we've got to stop trying to morph society into our ways. We've just got to accept that that's how it goes. It's like when people ask me, they're like, how many of your customers are using AWS? I'm like, easy. All of them. Like, all of them, whether they do it directly or indirectly, it's all of them. But they're also using Google, they're also using Azure for different things, right? And that's kind of where we're going.
But even if they do use other platforms, I think the terminology nowadays has from AWS has prevailed also, because there are so many different ways to say the same thing that people are just tired of learning every weird term that somebody invented, that's just to differentiate himself from another vendor or something like that. So yeah,
that's right.
Like we deal with that on a daily basis, and like API calls, things are like, oh, it's terrible. And it's impressive how far people go to differentiate themselves in no meaningful way.
That is funny, yeah. And then you see, so the APIs and the SDKs, like the way that your interface and the way that software interfaces with them will have a different language than the marketing language, because they'll have adopted, but meanwhile, for a long time, they'll have like a V1 API that still refers to, data center instead of availability zone, right? Now, that's the other thing too. How, before we finish up, I'd love to talk about keeping up with partners, because you're effectively working on top of other APIs and other integrations with partners. How do you make sure that you're on pace with them for your customers who want to, have Mist be their proxy to that part of the world?
Yeah, so there's not a magic recipe, I'm afraid. There's a lot of work involved, and the key part here is QA, CI/CD. So we have invested a lot on all those processes, automated as much of it as we can, run as many tests as we can, as often as we can. So that's the only way. Like we continuously track what's happening with the supported providers. We're testing everything in many ways, on the API layer, like with a headless browser, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the only reliable way we have found to keep up with everything. It's not easy, but once you set it up, things are better. They're not great. It's not like we're hanging around and have nothing to do, but you have to keep improving it, maintaining it, and all that. But yeah, there's a lot of effort involved, and obviously, like, the more parameters you add to the process, the more complicated and time consuming it becomes. So yeah, That's part of the reason why we're not just multi-cloud, we're like 100 cloud.
Yeah.
Because we're running infrastructure everywhere. Mist.io supports more than 20 providers currently. So we have infrastructure everywhere, many regions from one provider for each provider. So it can be complicated.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't rely on everybody being on the big three, because there are, or you can, but you've narrowed your customer case. But meanwhile, you've taken a specific choice to go further, and thus open up your customer ecosystem much wider, which is both good and also challenging, of course, because yeah, you're basically accruing technical debt at the rate that Bitcoin is increasing. At a risk of it more. But I like that, testing and creating the automated testing and QA and CIC, like putting all that stuff in at the core means that you are much more adaptable as those changes occur and you discover them. Because like I've seen product after product where we promise, like as we're doing the first design, like the first thing you do is you say, okay, we got to hit this date. How do we get there? Easy. Let's get rid of testing. And
Yeah.
like, like, no, you don't understand. That'll never win. Like you'll never gain value by removing testing, because you have to remove testing every time because you're doing this every time. Well, Chris, it's I'm really cheering you and the team on with what you're doing, and for we're gonna do some neat, some public facing stuff. We're gonna do some writing together, which is I'm excited by, because I'm gonna totally just steal all your capabilities and put my name beside them. So it's it's nice to do. But and I really appreciate the way you're approaching first to your customers, and the way that it very much comes through in the way you talk about everything, even in the excitement of the technology. It's not just the technology itself, but what we can do with it. And being able to open up access, being able to use this stuff for good. It's
The Star Trek effect.
Yeah, I look forward to building the tricoder and not just the computer that tells me like a giant Siri whether I should turn left or right at a particular maps point. So I'm excited by what we all have ahead, and to be able to be on this journey in the ecosystem with folks like yourself. I have a massive respect for what you're doing.
Thank you, likewise, and thanks for hosting me today. It was really nice catching up again.
Yeah,
After some time.
We'll do this again. Hopefully, we'll see as we get further in the year. We'll jump back on again, because we'll hear kind of how things are going. It's going to be a big year. We got a lot of steering and turning ahead to figure out what the event ecosystem is going to look like, what the product ecosystem is going to look like. As the world,
you think we'll get the chance to meet in person this year?
I'd love to say yes, but I've also learned, I'm old enough. This is a funny thing. So like if I hurt myself, I used to be angry that I couldn't go riding or running that next day. I was like, that was the level of impatience that I had. Now I hurt myself. I'm like, you know what? There's always next season. Like next spring, I can get back on it. So the good thing is that we will meet in person again. I hope it's this year. I really, truly do hope that we all get a chance to get out more. But either way, I look forward to the cans, whether it's on our side of the world, on where my side of it is being recorded, or whether it's I'd love to come see your part of the world as well.
If it's summer, it's probably our part of the world.
Yeah, that's it. So, Chris, we'll put in links, of course, folks who want to check out Mist.io, get involved, check it out. Very, very cool. And Chris and the team are doing really, really neat stuff. So thank you very much for sharing your story today.
Thank you. Bye.
Stop my recording here. Perfect.